Hello YouTube, I go for lots of walks on the Surrey hills in England and I thought you might want to see what that's like and the sorts of animals that I come across. Judging by how fat this newt is, this is definitely a female. You can see that it's not so much of a pond as a large puddle that she's swimming about in. You can see in the same puddle this whirligig beetle, really good fun to watch and a real nice bright shiny silver colour. I saw an unusual fungus growing on this log on a bit of heathland and I don't think I've seen it before. It looks like a lot of little tiny black balls, almost like caviar. So there's a good clump there, but look over this side. Real nice big mass of it, really interesting to look at. There was also quite a bit of it growing underneath the log as well, like on the floor, on the soil and that kind of thing. When I lifted the log you could see all this underneath it. You can hear a really noisy dog owner in the background. Can you see this guy? Look, he's just sitting on a log. I zoomed in so we could get a good look at him. Just a cute little squirrel having a little munch. I know a lot of people give grey squirrels a hard time because they're kind of pests and vermin or whatever. But they're still lovely animals in their own right, and they're very good at burying acorns and helping oak trees to grow and that sort of thing. Here's another one climbing up a tree. I always stop, if there's one fairly close to me, I'll stop and watch it. I can never resist trying to have a conversation with one as well. This is a butterfly that always stands out because of its acidic yellow colour. It's a brimstone butterfly. Really easy one to spot, and then you can zoom in with your camera, wait for it to fly off. Have a look in this pile of burnt wood. You can just see in the middle here there's a fungus called the Jew's ear. It's quite a cool fungus. It's really kind of rubbery, and you can see it really does look like an ear. There are similar fungi, like there's one called a scarlet elf cup, which is a very similar shape, and there's another one as well called orange peel fungus, again with this kind of rubbery shape that all kind of folds in on itself. Here's another butterfly. This is one of my favourites from when I was a child. It's called the comma, and you can see it's got this lovely kind of scalloped edge to it. You'll have to excuse my shadow in this little video clip, but this was me tracking a queen bumblebee. I think she's looking around trying to find a hole in the ground to go in and make her nest. You can probably hear her buzzing if I'm quiet. You can always tell the queens by just how absolutely massive they are compared to all the others. Here are some local cattle that just graze on this bit of heathland. They're quite often in this same area. I'm always a little bit wary of cows and things just because I got chased by one once and I had to run and jump over a fence, kind of fling myself over a fence rather than get hit by it. So yeah, since then I've always been a bit cautious, but these ones seem really well behaved and they're always just munching away really. Sorry. Yeah, obviously the time to be even more wary is when they've got calves with them, but even then I've been up here when they've got calves and these ones do seem particularly calm. This is just a bit of footage of a devil's coach horse, which is a type of beetle. It's long and thin. It quite often runs with its tail up, held up a bit like a scorpion. But yeah, cool looking creatures. This is something called a bee fly, which looks a bit like a fluffy bee, but it's got a long proboscis at the front. More often than not, you see it sort of hovering around. Obviously the bonus with having cows around is that you've got cow pats all over the place, and sometimes they're quite nice and dry like this. You can flick them over and you can see in here there's a little red dung beetle. Quite a cool little thing. I love dung beetles, they're just really cool shaped insects, and some of them are really quite spectacular. This one's particularly small species, but I still really like it. If memory serves, this one's called Rufipes, the scientific name. If you look at the sort of dampish patch that I removed the cowpat from, you can see quite clearly here a hole. This is probably a hole made by a larger species of dung beetle. Quite often they'll bury down probably about a metre down below the cowpat, and then they'll just take bits of the cowpat, take it down into the burrow with them. These are a couple of temporary ponds. These quite often dry up by the end of summer, and sometimes there's a few logs and things around and I can look under them and I find newts and toads and that sort of thing. Yeah, this is the pond from the other side, and you can see what I'm talking about. They're quite shallow ponds, but you can see there's a log over here that, for example, that's a sort of perfect place with all the mud underneath it. You can just lift up logs like this and find newts and toads quite often. There are some lovely views over the Surrey hills and lots of places where you can see for miles and miles. This particular place, there's another viewpoint across the other side where you can see as far as Brighton on a clear day. I quite often hear woodpeckers, but it's very rare that I get to see them because they're quite good at hearing somebody coming, and they'll actually just creep around to the other side of the tree and carry on pecking. But when you then walk around the other side of the tree to see them, they just keep getting onto the side of the tree that is furthest away from you, so you keep missing them. This particular one is the great spotted woodpecker. I'm not particularly good at naming birds, so if any of you know what this particular one is, if you can let me know in the comments. I'm much better with reptiles and amphibians and insects and invertebrates, so yeah, birds not so much. This is another nice viewpoint. I once flew my drone here before it became necessary to have a drone license, which I still haven't got round to getting. But yeah, it was a really good place to fly the drone. These are the sort of typical views you get in this area, but also I wanted to show you the typical sandy paths that you get on these heathlands. They're really cool, and I look out for flint tools because any flints that come up to this area have been brought here by humans in the past. There's no natural flint in this area. Here's a little blue tit, not very good footage, but I caught him just about, and then he flew down and I lost him for a minute, but I think he's in here somewhere. There he is. Yeah, and then you just see him fly off again. I'll often see hairy caterpillars walking across the heathland. They're from various different species. One of the more common ones is the fox moth caterpillar. I don't know if this might be a young version of that, but they do get a lot bigger if it is a fox moth. This is that viewpoint that I was telling you about, where on a good clear day, which this is, you can see all the way as far as Brighton in the distance. With all these hills being so high up, you can see why people in ancient times would have wanted to make settlements up here. Here's a bit more footage of another great spotted woodpecker. It's amazing how I don't see any for ages and then I get to see two on one day. I'm sure I remember reading somewhere recently that because their tongues are so long, they've got a groove that runs around their skull where the tongue can be tucked up right around the skull. It was cool being able to see him for quite some time, and even here where he flies off, he lands again and then I'm able to watch him again just for a little bit longer. This is how I find the flint tools, and this isn't a particularly good one, but this is what they look like when they're in situ, and I just kind of pick them out of the ground. You can see it has been napped, this one, but it's not particularly got a lot of facets on it. I'll show you a better one later. Right, this is a green tiger beetle. They're quite rare, quite hard to see, and they're really fast moving. They fly about in full sunshine, voracious hunters. You can see it's a bright metallic green colour. So I apologise, this is a pretty rubbish clip, but at least I managed to catch him just about. When I'm walking along the Heathland paths, I quite often find a lot of dead beetles, and it's because a lot of these adults, they only come out and they don't live for that long before they die, just long enough really to mate and lay eggs. This particular one is a minotaur beetle, which has 3 distinct horns on its thorax. This is another beetle that I see commonly on the heathland, and this one is called the bloody nose beetle. This is just a little male. They're a kind of a metallic bluish kind of tinge to them. They're kind of black when you first look at them, but they've got this metallic blue tinge. And yeah, they're really cute looking beetles because they're kind of fat and rounded. And if you harass them, I mean, you'd have to harass them quite a lot because I pick them up quite often and they're fine. But I think if you were to kind of squeeze them a bit or, show them a bit of a threat, then they can produce this red liquid, which is a distasteful liquid. It comes out of their mouth. And if you're a bird or something trying to eat it, you would probably spit it out because it tastes horrible. But if they do it on your finger, it looks a little bit like blood, which is why they're called the bloody nose beetle. Here's another dead minotaur beetle. You can see this one looks well and truly squashed. It's really flattened, but again you can see the 3 horns on the thorax. This is quite cool. You quite often see wood ants, And I find their nests all the time. They're massive heaps of like thousands of ants. But it's nice when you see an individual ant like this trying to carry something. So this is a parasitic wasp, so it's a lot bigger than the ant, and the ant's trying to carry it across back to the nest, and he's having a real struggle with it. But just look at the strength just of this one little tiny ant. This is what a living parasitic wasp looks like. This one's making its nest. So it's made a little pile of sand. They dig a little hole down, make a burrow, then they'll go and get a caterpillar. They'll paralyse it with their sting and they'll lay their eggs on it. When they hatch out, little larvae, they'll eat the caterpillar alive. As I'm filming this, a dog comes along and kind of disturbs everything. Here's a freeze frame of his nose. This is just a little tiny green metallic ground beetle. They're really fast moving. They run about in the sun, as you can see. Quite hard to track with a camera, but yeah, sometimes all you see is just a sort of flash of colour as it runs across the path. Okay, can you see this guy? Just sunbathing away. This is a viviparous lizard. They used to be called just the common lizard as well, but they're not really that common anymore. So viviparous lizard is a much better name for them. When they have babies, the babies are born in like little kind of sacs, a bit like laying eggs, but they're not really eggs because they haven't got shells to them. And they kind of hatch instantly out of this membrane, and then you've got these little tiny quite dark baby lizards. When I was much younger, I caught one of these and decided to keep it for a few days as a pet so I could look at it more closely. And it turned out to be a female that gave birth to quite a lot of little babies. We ended up taking them and releasing them on a special conservation site. When they've warmed up, they're really fast, and you tend to just see like a flash of them, just like a tail or something, as they run into the foliage. So it's quite nice when you get to see them for quite a while and track them with your camera. I was pretty convinced that it had run out on the other side and was here somewhere, so I zoomed out, and sure enough, there it is. So I could zoom back in on it and refocus. Sometimes things are just really brightly coloured and they just really stand out. So look at this on this plant. This caterpillar with, I mean, it's a bright green caterpillar anyway, but then the sun is kind of glowing through it. So it looked almost like it had a light inside it. There's nothing really to see here apart from these piles of logs, but I thought I'd show you these because if you're ever out and about on a bit of heathland and you're looking for lizards, this is a really great place to look because they love just kind of sitting on the logs sunbathing. This is another dead beetle. This time it's a door beetle, another type of dung beetle, like the Minotaur beetle was a dung beetle as well. You can see it's got this lovely metallic blue shine to it, particularly shiny, and there's a lot of ants trying to kind of dismantle it and take it back to their nest. Here's another small ground beetle, again nice metallic sheen to it, running across the heathland. Hopefully you can just about spot this. It's a little wolf spider and it's got a slightly bluish coloured egg sac on its back, and it just carries it under its abdomen, and then it just runs about with this egg sac just to protect it basically across the heathland. There was another little spider which is a crab spider that I saw at the same time. It was weird to see this woodlouse walking about in full sunshine, really bright sunny day. Normally they prefer dark and damp places. I probably should know what this bird is as well, but I don't, so let me know in the comments. Right, this is another one of those flint tools that I was on about, and this is how I quite often will find them, just with a little bit poking out. Like I say, anything that is flint in this particular area has been brought here. So the chances are that it probably has been napped as well. And this one, yeah, I thought this has got potential. So I dug down very carefully and hoiked it out. But what I'm looking for here is just like ones with lots of napped surfaces, and they're always the best ones. And I found quite a few that are really good shapes with like points and things on them. This particular one ends up being pretty good actually, but it's not as good as some of the ones that I've found. This is a typical flint scraper from this area, so it would have been used for cutting flesh, cutting skins of animals, and yeah, scraping meat off of bone and that kind of thing. So I was pretty much ready to leave, and I just spotted this deer. Normally whenever I spot a deer, I kind of go, oh, get my camera out, and by the time I've got my camera out, the thing has run off and I've missed it. Either that, or I just get a bit of footage of like a little blur of the back end of a deer, and that's it. But this guy just stood there looking straight at me, so I must have been downwind of it, I think. And I managed to get a really good view of this. And then after a while, a lady comes past on horseback, so the deer turns to look at the lady on horseback, but even the woman on horseback just paused as well to look at the deer with me, and we watched it together. And then when this deer does run off in the end, I said thank you to the woman on horseback and she went her separate way. This is probably the longest that I've ever got to view a wild deer before. Normally, like I say, they just run off. Anyway, thanks for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed it and it's given you a good idea of the kind of walks that I do in the Surrey Hills. Hit subscribe if you want to see any videos that I post in the future. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.